Hello all, hope you're all keeping well during the lockdown. Today we're going to be doing something a bit different because obviously we can't get out and about, so we're going to be revisiting a previous adventure that I did some years ago with my friend Jack. You might recognise him from some of my early videos on this channel. We're going to be talking about a very unusual, downright bizarre experience that we had quite a few years ago whilst out on the Wildcamp. We decided to do this Wildcamp without a tent, which is strange. But we also had quite a creepy, unusual encounter there. So we're going to go onto the computer, I'm going to phone him up, and hopefully you find this interesting, what unfolds. Did want to say, I recorded this yesterday, so obviously I'm doing this retrospectively, this intro. But just be warned that the quality of my headset that I'm using, it's not very good, so you can't always hear what I'm saying that clearly. I'm not exactly the most, sort of neutral speaker at the best of times, so hopefully that isn't too difficult for you guys. But it's an interesting story and one that actually brought back quite a bit of nostalgia retelling. So without further ado, let's go guys. So then I assume the call is working. Got Jack here.
Hello.
Yeah, we've got Google Earth set up. So what we're going to start off with is just a general overview of what we were actually doing on that day. Going back to, I think we just sort of left like college time. We were about 18, 19 years old. So we were quite young still. That sort of concept around freedom was quite new. You know, doing things for ourselves more, I guess, at that age as you do. And some of the stuff we wanted to start doing, we had quite a bit of time, was just to do a bit of wild camping, do a few sort of challenges and stuff in the outdoors. So we came up with this idea of doing a wild camp without a tent, didn't we? We thought, we don't need tents at the end of the day. People think you're mad for it.
Yeah.
We literally thought, why do you need a tent? As long as it doesn't rain, you don't need one. I know some of my friends have said, what if foxes come? What if wild animals? I mean, look, it's not like the forest of Russia, is it? You're literally talking about Basildon in Essex, so I don't think that was a concern, to be honest. The only thing you would be a bit concerned about is people, but then you're going to keep a lower profile if you're not in a big, brightly coloured tent. That was the premise, shall we say, and also the idea was, what was it, Jack, that we were going to sort of do?
We were going to practice. You have to understand, we were still pretty young and imaginative back then. And we wanted to practice what we would do in the case of like some form of minor apocalyptic scenario. Like what we would do on the first day. Like civilization has somewhat fallen. You can't stay in the towns anymore because that's just too dangerous, so you have to get out of the towns. What would we do?
Exactly.
And that's sort of the idea of what we were doing.
That was it, yeah. Quite a fitting time to be talking about it. But yeah, so what I did, I lived on Canvey Island, so I decided to get on the train. Got the train on my own. I'd packed all of my food, and I came in here at Stamford the Hope Station. So Jack lived in Stamford, so I got the bus from here to the Sorrels, and this is where you lived, opposite the Cat Cracker pub, which at the time was now Co-op. So it's going to Street View, and we can see there's your house. So that was your house. And this
a long time. That is a very old Google Maps image because that van has been gone for like 10 years almost.
Historical artifact. So yeah, and then we met up, and we decided to start walking.
You're going the wrong way.
Yeah, I'm going the wrong way, guys. All right, we've just been over this. We had a try run. So if we come out, we decided to go along the Manor, which is this big road. It's this big roadway, and we walked basically along this yellow footpath that you can see. We walked all the way up here to Gifford's Cross Road. We carried on down here. We had our camping equipment on the back,
We followed this all the way through the houses to Lampett's Hill, right? That's the name of this big road. All the B1420 as it's affectionately
As it's
known
never
by
called.
nobody. And you get the sense that you're going out of town at this point, I think, don't you? I mean, you know, your houses here, but you're getting a bit more sort of suburban. Look, you've got views to One Tree Hill, and this is actually in the distance. This is actually where we would be camping. This is where we're going to walk to quite a way, Lampett's Lane. So we're walking down this road. Let's just come out of street view here. We're walking along. We walk quite a long distance, and then
It was a very knackering walk.
It was. 'Cause it was a really hot day, I think, wasn't it?
So it was like just getting to the point where the days were pretty tiring for physical activities.
So we're coming up to here, going through, and look, at this point it's getting a bit of that shantytown vibe. That sort of out of town suburban aesthetic to it. You've got like nice little sort of old plotland holiday type houses built out in the countryside. This was all quite a rural area back before World War II when this area got developed, as is the case with a lot of this part of Essex. And then you've got these sort of gypsy type areas, like sort of run down shacks and stuff. Look at that. I mean, yeah, you get the vibe. You know, it's getting a bit out of town here. It's getting a bit desolate. And then it's quite a main road that we're going down. So it now becomes Southend Road. So we're walking down Southend Road. It's not isolated by any means, but you go quite a long way along here. You cross the railway track, as you can see. You've got a farm on the left. Let's have a quick look at that. Quite a nice old sort of style farm there. So, you know, it's a mixture of countryside and kind of run down hinterland is the way I'd describe this area, I think. Got this old sort of...
To be honest, that describes a lot of Essex.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. That's the real Essex.
Just a wasteland.
Wasteland, yeah.
I mean, to look at it, you wouldn't even know that we weren't in an apocalyptic situation.
Yeah, true. So at this point we cross the A13, the big road. This is like a landmark, and at this point you go from urban to the south, out into sort of countryside and woodland out into the north. And there was this abandoned car that used to be...
It was an abandoned, burnt-out car.
You can
when
see
we
it
walked
there.
past.
Yeah, it's an abandoned car, and it was quite creepy, wasn't it, really? Because it looked like it had been stolen, dumped there, and someone set it on fire, something like that.
Yeah.
But that was sort of when the vibe was getting a bit more of the wasteland, weird feel. We carried on.
There's also a lack of like any major pathway up this road, so it was quite difficult to walk up with cars going up and down.
Right, you have to step onto the grass verge and stuff to avoid the cars. And this is One Tree Hill now, a bit of a nature reserve sort of area. There's a lot of nature reserves in this vicinity. So we walked all up to the top of it to Dry Street, which is the old rural high street sort of road that used to be Basildon before Basildon was built after World War II quite abruptly. This is the rural area that it used to run through. So these houses here are quite old cottage type houses. If we can paint up a bit of a picture, these are old little houses that you've got, and little bungalows and stuff like that. So we're walking up this road, Dry Street. We zoom in. You can see that there's not much room to avoid cars. If they turn a corner sharp, you're in trouble. So yeah, we're walking along here. And you've got these rural houses. Some of them are quite nice. Cherry Tree Cottage. I'd stay in there. They do look pretty old school. In a nice way, I'd say. But then some of the houses are a bit less. They're a bit more of the wasteland vibe. They're a bit more... They were once nice little bungalows. But now, they're somewhat in a dilapidated state. And this is where the story gets interesting. These are like old sort of Victorian era, early 20th century holiday homes. And some of them are quite overgrown and wooded. And then we came to this old house. This is where the story actually, the spooky story starts. So this was it. And I've always been exploring interesting bits and pieces since young age. So
yeah, every sign about this house screamed abandoned from the very first time we looked at it.
It did.
We're walking past. We looked. You can see it slightly in there. Everything is so. It looks like it's not even a house.
No,
front drive or anything. It looks like scrubland.
There's been no car here in years. Look, that gate. I mean, how do you even get out? Where's even the actual way out of this house? That's part of this garden, I swear. So how do you even get out of here? For daily, regular use and living in it. It's a weird one. So, as we thought it was abandoned, we decided to have a little look in there, didn't we? As you do.
Yeah.
And it's overgrown. Unfortunately, I don't think there's that many views of it. But if we come out of Street
you can look at it from above. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see the house is covered up by the trees almost. There's
It's
garden is completely.
There is no difference between the gardens of the house and the scrubland next to it.
Exactly, that's it. Like if you look,
No difference.
You've got actual gardens of the same sort of size, and yet this one's just trees. So it's obviously been let go quite significantly. Old huts just peeping out the undergrowth. And look, even going back some time, you can start to see a bit of the grass, but on the whole, it still looks in a fairly abandoned state. And this is 20 years ago now. We're going back.
What it looked like to us at the time was it looked like the house of an old person that had passed away, and it just hadn't gone back into the property ladder yet, the property market.
That's exactly what I'd say, and that's a way that a lot of places get abandoned, isn't it? Houses especially. Just no one inherits it, and it just gets left until it gets demolished. So, going back to the street view, we hopped over this little fence, which, as you can imagine, wasn't difficult. And as we're going in, there's like this sort of porched entrance, and now this led into a kitchen, didn't it? Like a sort of.
It was round the back.
That's right. So we walked through there.
Under that little roof thing, there was a side entrance into that shed. The door to the shed was just open. It was full of crap rotting away. Clearly hadn't been used in years.
And that's it. I remember we got into like this kitchen sink area, wasn't it? And there was literally tea towels,
pots and pans,
everything just left, wasn't it? Like
mouldy.
It hadn't been used. This whole room.
There was a thick layer of mould on everything. We had to leave pretty quickly because, we didn't know if we were going to get some sort of disease or something. But it looked like nobody had been there in at least 15 years.
Exactly. That's the thing. So as we were in there, I remember this one image that stuck in my head, which just sums up how crazy what's about to happen is. There's this tea towel, or like a hand towel, on like a hook or like a holder on the wall, and the towel was long enough so that it reached the floor. Or as it had decayed, it had started to sag onto the floor, and this towel, as it had gotten wet and damp, it literally disintegrated into a puddle of like mush onto the floor. But the top of it was still hanging on the wall, so it had almost like oozed. This like fabric had literally disintegrated and oozed onto the floor. It had become like part of the floor, and I remember that image was sort of just showed the level of abandonment. No one had actually used this room and the facilities in a good, at least 5 years. Probably in the ballpark of 10 years abandoned, that looked to me, having visited quite a few abandoned places in my time.
And on top of that, there was a doorway into the house proper, and we didn't go in because we just didn't want to spend too much, because this wasn't what we were planning on doing that day. This was just a side stop.
Like a full urbex.
So we did look through the door. It was a full like glass window door, and inside it wasn't anywhere near as bad as the sort of extension kitchen, but it was very, very dusty. The wallpaper, like in the walls, you could see mold in the corners, curtains hanging off the rails. There was no like proper furniture, like there was no telly. No, there was just like a couple of mouldy sofas and like a really chipped and damaged coffee table that we could see.
It wasn't ruined, but it was very much, it wasn't. We didn't for a second think that wasn't also abandoned. We just thought it was better sealed from the elements, didn't we? Really, I guess.
Yeah, and I just want to add that all the while we were going around this place, we weren't quiet. We were having loud conversations, not shouting, but like just talking at a normal voice, like we are now.
Yeah.
We were like clattering stuff, like knocking stuff about, not like in a aggressive way, but just like if we saw something, we wanted to see what was under it, we'd like pick it up, look under it, put it down, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we weren't exactly being quiet and stealthy. If there was anyone in their house, they would have heard us.
Yeah, it was quite easy to, hear us probably coming in there and stuff and having a look. And this is the thing. So once we'd looked around, we decided we weren't going to go in the house. But we'd started to leave, and I remember I was in front. So, to exit all these places, every time I leave a place, I try and do it quite quick with an explore, because you don't know, like someone could be walking their dog down this road and they see you just pop over the fence. You don't realise till you've already come out. And then they ask, what are you doing? They might sort of tell you off or something, you're not getting any serious trouble, but you might.
Especially if they live locally and know more than you do about the place that you've just been in.
So I remember I actually climbed out. I'd just literally gotten over the fence, and Jack was about to, but I think you were just a bit behind. And then this is when the weird thing happens, isn't it?
If you remember, I had the idea of on the way out just pressing the doorbell to see if it worked.
Oh, right.
So as you were climbing over the gate to leave, I just quickly walked up to the front door and I pressed the doorbell, and it didn't make any sound. It was clearly a disconnected doorbell. There was no. This house wasn't the sort of one where you have insulated walls and windows and might soundproof noises from inside. It was a very bare bones old house. You would have heard the doorbell on the inside ring if it did.
Yeah.
So it was clearly disconnected. So I pressed the doorbell, and then, not hearing anything, I went and followed Liam to the gate, and I was halfway over the gate when
Guy actually popped out the door, didn't he? And he said, I think he said to you, like, do you need anything?
He said, do you need something? That was the first thing. He didn't say, like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Like, he didn't ask anything a resident would ask someone who was trespassing on their property.
Yeah.
He just said, do you need something?
That's it. And I remember, I don't even think I saw the guy, I just heard, and I realised he'd been seen, so I just swiftly sort of came out. Must have just sort of waited around the corner. But Jack, did you even speak to him? You just sort of shouted out.
At the time, I wasn't really processing, because by all accounts, there was no one in that. There shouldn't have been a person in the house. There couldn't have been. It was not a house that was lived in. The doorbell was disconnected. All the doors, to all the peripheral buildings, were just open, hanging off. Everything was mouldy and horrible. So there just shouldn't have been anyone in there. So when someone opened the front door, my first thought was, oh, we've made a mistake. There is someone living here. And I'm now going to have to try and get us out of this situation so we don't get in trouble with the person. So I essentially said, I pretty much told the truth, just like a half lie. I said, had come to this area previously and we'd seen the house and it looked abandoned, and we're people who are interested in like local history of
That's right. Yeah.
abandoned places. So we just wanted to have a quick check out of the building to see if there was any like history behind it, see if we could find anything interesting, and that we didn't mean any trouble, like any harm or anything. So that's basically what I said. But he didn't reply or anything, and then he just closed the door again
and let us go on our merry way, wasn't it? And that was it. It was almost like I didn't even see this guy. That's the thing. He literally just must have popped out, said that, and then gone straight back. And we were just so surprised at this point that someone lived in there, because like this place was genuinely just left a ruin. I mean, if this guy did live in there, he would have been. And this was, to clarify, this was an old guy, wasn't it? Can you describe what he looked like?
He wasn't like ridiculously old. I would say he was probably in his 70s.
Yeah.
I don't know. He did seem pretty gnarled, like he'd been through a lot. The thing is, this place, it's in the middle of nowhere. This isn't the sort of place you usually get squatters or anything.
No, it wasn't anything like that, was it?
It couldn't have been a squatter. Like, almost certainly wasn't a squatter anyway. He was sort of too old to be most squatters are younger people who can put up with living conditions that are not very good.
No. And that's it. Like, this guy, if he did live in there, you know, there's no implication that he ever left the property. Like, how does he get out? Perhaps the gate opened, but there'd not been any vehicles in there, and it's quite a walk to the town if you are elderly. But if you are fit enough to walk to Basildon to, you know, get your shopping and all that stuff, then surely you can tidy up the garden and just make the environment secure and healthy to live in. And it wasn't either of those things, was it? I mean, this place, like I say, it was going mouldy. This guy was literally just letting his surroundings decay around him whilst he lived in there. That's what we can only presume. But it was just such a bizarre situation. We're not people to really sort of believe in ghosts and stuff like that, or
we're not really superstitious in any way.
But this was probably just one of the downright strangest things I've ever experienced. You know, it just didn't add up that a guy would be living in there, and yet as we'd sort of left by that point, fully sort of assured that this place was long abandoned, out pops this guy, and he's sort of gone without sort of comment in no time. And it's like, what just happened there, you know?
To put it into context, the evidence that there was a real life human being living in that house was about as non-existent as the evidence for a ghost existing in the house. At the time, we just could not understand the situation.
Humans living in there at this point, was there? There was no sign of any sort of upkeep or regular use. And the thing is, you know, people might not, I suppose, know this generally, but places deteriorate rapidly when they're left by people. Like, as soon as people go and their body temperature or heating keeps and weatherproofing keeps a place at a constant temperature, as soon as that's gone from a property, the weather starts to break the building down, and once the elements get in, stuff gets abandoned ultra fast. And this building, you know, it didn't, you know, so basically what I'm saying is, if someone's in somewhere, it stays in reasonably good nick, and once they leave it, nature just suddenly takes hold. And this place was as if nature had taken hold while someone was still present inside it. And this guy didn't look very, you know, fit to look after himself, to be, well, I didn't see him in fairness, but I got the impression that he'd sort of let everything go, but then he'd still actually managed to get by living in this place.
I live right next door to a house that is like one of those ones where you have an elderly resident that dies and then no one inherits it and it doesn't go back onto the property market.
Yeah.
And that house, which hasn't been lived in a decade, is probably, looking at it, is probably in better condition than this house.
Long abandoned. I mean, that's what the aerial photography even suggests, isn't it? And so, yeah, that was it. We didn't think that much of it immediately, did we? I think at the time, it was strange. It was a bit unnerving.
Spooky. It was unnerving. That's the word. It was unnerving, but
I think
we didn't start properly thinking about it until later.
No, that's it. We were initially quite, I think, just unnerved that like someone had sort of caught us doing a bit of a mini explore. But at least once we started actually going into this is the area of woods, isn't it, that we decided to stay in?
Yeah, in the dense part, quite close to the road. Yard, wasn't it? No, it was where the road curves. It was in the dense part in there. Yeah.
As we were sort of setting up the camp, I remember, that's when we started to sort of take it all in and think like, why was someone there? How was he living there? How could he look after himself if he couldn't look after the property? How was he even able to sort of survive in that place?
Yeah, there was no evidence of like relatives that come round to help him out either, because if he did have relatives that visited him, they would surely help with maintaining the property a bit.
You couldn't even park a car in there, so how, say his friend, like his family dropped food off for him, or carer even if he had a carer, where would they park? It just doesn't make sense, does it? And I know this imagery may not be from the year that we visited, but it looked very much similar to this, if even worse from memory. It was 2016, wasn't it, to be clear? So, no, it's actually 2015, I think. It was around that time, yeah. So anyway, as we set up camp, and bear in mind we haven't got a tent, so we were literally just sitting, I remember, on this big old wooden log, weren't we? It's like our bench for most of the evening. Food, talking, playing a bit of music, and we slept on this old mat, didn't we, Jack?
It was a it was a large casino cloth reject from the company that my dad works at. He makes casino cloths for companies where he works, and he often came home with rejects. And these are big waterproof, like they're proper, like nicely made cloths, and they're big enough for two people to use as a ground sheet, and we didn't have a proper ground sheet, so that's why we bought it.
It was almost like
it was pretty funny though. It was like it was like a roulette table
it's
casino
white,
thing.
We upturned it and it was white, so it's just like a nice big white comfortable sheet. Didn't have to worry about getting dirty, and we put our sleeping bags just on that, and you could proper kick back and relax. But that was it. So whilst we were in the woods, I mean, it's getting dark for a long while, and we're actually telling a few ghost stories, weren't we? I think, Jack, you'd actually looked a few up on your phone, or we both might have done.
Yeah, I remembered some, and then you were looking them up.
That's right. Yeah, so we're telling stories, like campfire ghost stories, wasn't it? And that's when we sort of were saying, like, this guy that lived in the house over here, what if, you know, he had, like, seen us? You know, it's entirely plausible that he'd sort of watched us walking down this road. He'd clearly probably seen that we had camping kit on our back, or hiking kit. So you say he couldn't have followed us down this path, wasn't that far, followed us, and in the night, you know, who knows, he could have come after us, he could have sliced us up. There's not much we could have done about it, really.
Yeah.
But that's when I think, I know that is a bit fantasised, but that's when we then started just thinking how strange what actually had happened was. And that, you know, it was quite spooky, and that really all these ghost stories we've been telling, you know, we'd sort of practically just sort of had a similar experience just happen to us. I've not really had any sort of ghostly experiences, or I have once, but turned out to be a prank that was pulled on me. Very convincing one.
Yeah.
But I've never had any ghostly experiences that I've, you know, just not been able to explain. But that one there was probably the one that came close. And even if it wasn't ghostly, just what was going on with that guy. So, and literally the funny thing is, back to the camp, So we'd actually done quite well, and it was really comfortable on the forest floor. Despite the stories, we weren't that scared. We sort of went asleep, and we woke up in the middle of the night to rain. Full on proper rain chucking it down.
Probably the biggest rainfall of the entire year so far in our
like
area.
Torrent, wasn't it? And we were actually in the woods. I don't think the wood cover was that thick. I think the trees that we were near were actually like small coppice trees, weren't they? So it wasn't like the big leaf cover that we had. You can see actually this area, it's not that dense compared to something like that. But yeah, so we got basically covered in rain, but we were half asleep. So I remember I literally just grabbed an umbrella, popped it, and I basically rested the umbrella between our heads. So we basically had like a semi canopy over our heads, and we were so like half asleep, we literally just went straight back to sleep in the middle of the rain. Like at that point, you don't really care. I mean, we had quite a lot of insulation. I know you're wet, but we had a lot of layers.
Well, the thing was, because we were in sleeping bags, the sleeping bags actually protected us quite a bit. So
Yeah,
we weren't. Our faces were wet, but our bodies just they were damp from the touch from where the water had gone through the sleeping bags. But
that's it.
Like we weren't soaked. So we were just like, well, at this point it doesn't matter. We can't go. It was like 3 in the morning. We can't go back now, so we're just gonna have to tough it out for the remainder of the night.
And we literally just slept. I think the rain did wake us up a couple of times. We woke up next morning and we literally just hiked it all the way back. And I remember being absolutely knackered at that point. I mean, we were soaking wet. All our kit was soaking wet. We weren't in a mood to sort of carry on and like have a good breakfast and enjoy the day.
The funniest thing is that isn't even the worst camping experience I've ever had. We were literally laying in the middle of a rainstorm with no tent and no real protection. And I still had one worse camping trip a couple of years later than that, in terms of comfortability and all of that.
Is this the Ivanhoe Beacon?
Yeah.
Go and check out the video. If you go back on this channel, Heav's Wanderings, it's one of the early videos, and I think it's called Essex to the Chilterns, using only one bus ticket. This was basically a big old challenge we did, where we actually got buses from Chelmsford up here. We got the bus all the way to somewhere in Buckinghamshire border, Iving
near Tring.
Yeah, near Tring it was, and it was a stunning viewpoint. But we hammocked in the woods, and we got absolutely
stunning area. Awful sleep. Awful next day.
And it got ice cold at night because it was still like Easter time, so it hadn't warmed up. But yeah, that's a story for another time. You can check that out in the video. I think it goes back to 2018, so go and check that video out. It's one of the earlier videos on the channel. Right, yeah, so cheers Jack for helping me tell this crazy story.
No problem.
Hopefully you'll see from us when we're actually out on the trail after lockdown. Yeah, see you later guys. Don't forget to have a look at the channel, subscribe to it. So that's all folks, over and out.